of healthcare reform, but one that is going to protect our liberties and not simply shift on more unsustainable costs and spending to the government. Those are the normal debates that we have, but we have that debate.
Yes.
And we can have it right here without fear of that type of retribution that so many people in other places who are exercising their deeply held beliefs, their rights of conscience, their faith perspectives, but they do so under grave threat. This is still America.
And if I may respond, if the gentleman will yield.
Yes.
The United States has historically been a beacon of human rights to the rest of the world. And so it is no accident that a fellow comes to the United States seeking religious freedom. I think the undertone of what others here have spoken is there's a sense that some of our commitment to religious freedom is under siege by forces of secularism. Now, you can be secular if you wish, but nonetheless, the First Amendment says that the right to practice religion shall not be infringed upon. And so all these kind of trimming at the margins, the edges, of someone's ability to practice her faith or his faith, one, affects us, but two, it also affects our standing for the rest of the world, our ability to advocate for those who do not have the same freedom as we. If others see our example as substituting religious freedom for something which is less so, how much less will our beacon be dimmed? And that will have tragedy not only for us, but also for them.
That's an outstanding point to make. It's something, as I tried to state earlier, that we so take for granted, our rights of conscience, as we exercise them through faith, through prudential judgment in our everyday life. It has been embedded in our culture and therefore in our government until very recently, until this measure has come along and is coercing people unjustly into violating that sacred space, that right of conscience. And by the way, this is not just people of faith who are speaking out. Other persons of goodwill can see the fundamental principle here, that if we erode that, we are eroding something that is essential to human dignity and the very flourishing of democratic ideals itself. So thank you for pointing that out.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. The gentleman from Michigan, if you're ready to speak, I'd love to hear from you. Congressman Tim Walberg, a good friend who has been here a long time, again, championing these issues, standing up for what he believes to be right and just, and being a good partner in trying as well to exercise his rights before this body of good conscience about what is essential and good. So thank you, Congressman Walberg, for coming tonight.
Well, I thank the gentleman from Nebraska, and I thank you for your leadership, and thank you for the opportunity to stand with principled legislators. We're not talking about parties here. We're talking about people who understand rights and responsibilities. The First Amendment to our Constitution says so clearly that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Tonight we are talking about rights of conscience. Our First Amendment liberty affirms that for us, and affirms us for greater principles than just political or even governmental. In approximately the year my father was born, 1903, Abraham Kuyper, a theologian, and I take great comfort in the fact that theologians sometimes aspire into political life. Coming from the pastorate myself and pastoring for over a decade, this theologian, who became the Prime Minister of the Netherlands, said this. He said, "When principles that run against your deepest convictions begin to win the day, then battle is your calling, and peace has become sin. You must, at the price of dearest peace, lay your convictions bare before friend and enemy with all the fire of your faith." That's a powerful statement. It's a statement that I'm sure Mr. Kuyper would have said to his brethren in the Netherlands is not coming simply from my religious convictions, but rather coming from my conviction for freedom and the right given us by a Creator God. And so he fought. Sadly, as we know the course in the Netherlands, they've gone away from the freedom of life And we know the impact upon the unborn. We know the impact upon the infirm. We know the impact upon the elderly. We know the impact upon the frail, upon the disabled in the Netherlands. Their lives are cast off. Their lives are not as secure. And so here tonight, Mr. Speaker, we stand for rights of conscience that go way beyond just issues of medicine and issues of government. It goes to the core of life and the sanctity of it and the humanity of each and every individual. And so we've talked about some people who, because of their convictions about things like life, abortifacients, contraceptives, and people who are compassionate to businesses and compassionate in using their businesses for the good of people, like the Greens already referred to with Hobby Lobby, who allegedly have given over $500 million to charities and give to their employees and benefit them and see that as an outflow of their religious life as well. Or we go over to St. Louis, where Chris and Paul Greisdeck, who run a 105-year-old business that they've carried on from their father and grandfather, with 150 employees who have taken a stand for their religious beliefs as well, and have very clearly stated that they will not abandon their beliefs in order to stay in business. The impact is upon all of their people. Or we look at a gentleman, an 85-year-old gentleman by the name of Charles Sharp, also from northeast Missouri, who's made millions in insurance business, but he's taken that and founded Heartland Ministries in 1992, providing rehabilitation services to men and women battling drug and alcohol addiction, and employing 170 employees. And yet, if this HHS mandate comes down on them, those employees will lose their job because of millions of dollars of fines. And I could go to businesses in my district, Eden Foods, who has challenged the insurance rule on religious grounds, or Weingart's Garden Center in Oakland County, Michigan, the same, employing many, many employees and providing benefits, and now are being challenged with this HHS mandate. And I could go on and on. Mr. Speaker, it is time for us who understand what America is about to stand firmly with our convictions and uphold liberties that go way beyond ourselves. Our framers and founders understood that. Jonathan Witherspoon said a republic once equally poised must either preserve its virtue or lose its liberty. We're losing our liberty. John Adams, and I close with this, second President of the United States, said our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. Mr. Speaker, the people of the United States are great people. This government is a great government. But when the attack comes on what makes America America, and that its liberty and its freedom and its moral and traditional value heritage that is now being impinged upon to the point of violating rights of conscience, we must stand and stand firmly. And so I thank the gentleman from Nebraska for pulling us together to speak out clearly tonight. And I would hope, Mr. Speaker, that those who are listening and watching tonight on C-SPAN will speak out very strongly to their communities and their families, calling us back to decency, order, conviction, and a conscience that even God can honor. And I yield back.
I thank the gentleman from Michigan for his thoughtful and powerful remarks. I particularly noted what you said, the rights of conscience go way beyond the issues of health care. That was very well put. Thank you very much for your leadership on this issue as well. I want to turn now to Congressman Dan Lipinski and yield time to him. As I said earlier in the beginning of this hour, this is not about politics, it's not about partisanship, it's about principle. Congressman Lipinski and I don't share the same party affiliation. but we share this principle. He has been one of the key lead co-sponsors on this initiative, the Health Care Conscience Rights Act, and has stood as well side by side in helping promote this effort to revive an understanding of this fundamentally American principle that transcends the philosophical differences that tend to define the pushing and shoving that go on around here. So I'm very, very grateful, Congressman Lipinski, for your willingness to come tonight and speak with us.
Thank you, Mr. Fortenberry. Thank you for yielding and for leading us here tonight. I'm glad to join you here from this side of the aisle. Mr. Speaker, religious freedom is our first freedom, as stated right there first in our First Amendment. And this is not just freedom to worship as we hear now it defined down in many ways. It's not just freedom to worship in our own homes, in our churches, synagogues, mosques, temples. It is freedom to practice and live out religious faith here in America. On June 21st through July 4th, the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops is having a fortnight for freedom to pray, educate, and act for religious freedom. But this is not just a Catholic issue. This is an issue for all Americans. It's an American issue. Just as you said, this is not just a Republican issue. Freedom is what our country was founded on. We just recently celebrated or commemorated Memorial Day for all those who have died for our country and for freedom. Friday is Flag Day. Again, remembering what America is all about in our freedom. And on the 4th of July, we celebrate the freedom that our country was born to serve and to live out and be a beacon for the rest of the world. We need to uphold that freedom. And the HHS mandate, amongst other efforts, other things that have been done by the federal government, unfortunately, in recent years, has really run counter to this freedom. And, Mr. Speaker, I want Americans to understand what this is about. It's not about birth control or abortion, although we were told in the health care law, Obamacare was not going to cover abortion, but we know the HHS mandate requires the coverage of abortion-inducing drugs. But that's not what at the core of this is about. It's about freedom. It's about taking away Americans' freedom, requiring them to participate in activities that violate their conscience. Unfortunately, I think there's been a lot of misdirection on this, and I think it's important for all of us to focus back on what this is about. It's about freedom for all Americans to live their lives according to their conscience, whether or not they are practice of faith or not. It's to live according to their conscience. And so, Mr. Speaker, I just am very happy to join my colleagues here, join with them in helping to support, protect, and call upon Americans to speak up, rise up, and bring that message to Congress, to their representatives, that freedom must be protected. We must do it now. We cannot continue to let freedom slip away. And I'm very happy to join my colleagues tonight, and I yield back to Mr. Fortenberry.
Before you leave, Congressman Lipinski, let me say, first of all, thanks. I'm very deeply grateful to you for two things. One is your personal friendship. Second is the gift of your leadership on these essential American issues. Now, I think most American people want to see what we just did, Republicans and Democrats standing right here and focusing on that which can be constructively achieved for the greater good. And so for you providing that example of strong bipartisanship in this effort, I'm very, very grateful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, can I inquire as to how much time we have?
About 12 and a half.
Mr. Speaker, now I'd like to turn to my new friend, Congressman Mark Meadows from near Ashland, North Carolina. He was newly elected for this Congress, and I'm just going to say this, and I hope this doesn't embarrass you, but I consider you a rising star. Your thoughtfulness, your immediate engagement on that which is most important around here, your willingness to look for good outcomes, to me has been a great example. So we're grateful for your willingness to come tonight, and I turn it over to you.
Well, I thank the gentleman from Nebraska, and I too would echo just the fact that we're friends, and I appreciate your leadership on this and your heart that it represents. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to join with my colleagues in the strong opposition to the Obama administration's attack on our fundamental religious freedoms that we have, our First Amendment rights that must be protected. This HHS mandate that has been mentioned many times tonight is an unprecedented government overreach that forces charities and businesses to buy plans for their employees and provide coverage in areas that violate their deeply held religious beliefs. You know, we've already heard about Hobby Lobby and the fact that they're facing fines of some $1.3 million a day just for believing and upholding those values that they have dear. And I'd love to say that I wish that it was just with Obamacare that we're having this attack, but it's not. You know, throughout our nation, we're seeing our religious liberties being attacked in a number of areas. In New York, you know, the school board has been working there for 2 decades to block Bronx Household of Faith from meeting at a public building for their worship services on Sundays. In Montana, we see that Canyon Ferry Road Baptist Church faced election law charges just for a volunteer passing out petitions to place a marriage amendment on a Montana ballot. In Louisiana, we saw a federal contractor ordered Calvary Baton Rouge Church to stop feeding people who were left homeless during Hurricane Katrina's aftermath just because the group offered voluntary prayer service and Bible studies. You know, these are painful examples, Mr. Speaker, but one that comes home to me, and I'll share this and close with this. In my home district, a 6-year-old writing a poem about her grandfather who served our country honorably put in there that he prayed to God for peace and he prayed to God for strength. And yet, they wanted to strike the words God from that poem. We have created a culture that, quite frankly, we cannot continue to support. We must stand up and stand against it. And so tonight I join with so many of our colleagues and those that are watching. I hope that you will understand the true point of which we've come, that we must stand up and fight. In the rotunda of this very building is a painting of a Mayflower where they had a particular person there, William Brewster, who had a Bible open, and the foundation of our country was really about religious freedoms. And we have it there as a reminder of that. To me, that's got a special meaning, because William Brewster, holding that Bible there for those freedoms that we must hold dear, is my 11th great-grandfather. I'm a direct descendant of that, and so today I am here joining with him and my colleagues to say that we must stand and we must fight back and make sure that we protect this freedom and not yield. Thank you. I thank my friend and colleague, and with that I'll yield back.
What a powerful and beautiful story to share with you. I had no idea of your family being one of the founding families of this country, and now, 13 generations later, you stand here with the mantle of authority now on your shoulders, directing the affairs of state. That's got to be very gratifying and a proud moment for your entire family, but it's also proud for me to know, given that I consider us to be good friends. Thank you so much for your commentary. Now I'd like to recognize my friend Congressman Tim Huelskamp from Kansas for a few thoughts on this subject. Thank you as well for your tireless and strong leadership on these fundamental principles of protecting that which is necessary for all of us to understand at the core where our liberty comes from. Thank you so much, Congressman Huelskamp.
Thank you, Congressman Fortenberry. Pleasure to be here, and I will warn you, as I will warn those who are listening, I'm going to try to be frank and obviously short. With our time, I'll be candid and truthful, but I think it may be uncomfortable to hear what is happening. And simply put, the HHS mandate is a religion tax. You heard me right. If you morally or ethically disagree with abortion, drugs, contraceptives, sterilization, it doesn't matter. Under the President's health care plan, you will pay for it, for your employees, for your family, for yourself. And even if you don't want it, and if you dare to follow your conscience, actually practice your faith and refuse to participate, you will be fined. You will be taxed. You will be forced to give your hard-earned money to Washington, even if you morally disagree. That, my fellow Americans, is a religion tax, a faith tax, a tax on conscience, a direct attack on our freedom of religion, a shocking attack on that first right in the First Amendment, the right to believe in and follow the God we choose. As of now, there have been 31 lawsuits by nonprofits filed over the HHS mandate, another 30 lawsuits filed for-profit or nonprofit. This includes hospitals, businesses, charities, religious colleges, Catholic dioceses, many others. Let me illustrate the impact, particularly with Catholic services. 1 in 6 patients in America are treated in Catholic hospital. Catholic Charities provides an estimated 334 orphanages, feeds millions of Americans each year, serves thousands of our homeless each year, and the mandate punishes these individuals for feeding the homeless, takes away help for the sick, starves the hungry, punishes the entrepreneur. Since the initial announcement, the administration has issued multiple updates claiming to modify the mandate. These are simply deceitful smokescreens, and even if such accommodation did exist in the language, the First Amendment is to be protected, not accommodated. It's kind of like accommodating our freedom of speech by saying you use your freedom of speech on Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, but Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, that's probably not permitted. We should ask ourselves, how can the beacon of freedom known as America become home to religious intolerance on such a massive scale? Frankly, there is a war on religious liberty in this country, and there's no one else to write in defense. It is up to us. We must be ever vigilant in defense of our God-given rights. We must be ever vigilant in safeguarding the protections in law for those rights. We must be ever vigilant in standing for that first right of that First Amendment, religious liberty. Thank you for your leadership, Congressman. I yield back.
Thank you, Congressman Huelskamp. I know you have to run, but we're very, very grateful that you were willing to share those powerful sentiments tonight. Thank you as well for your leadership. Let me turn now to Congressman Jim Jordan of Ohio, a former national championship wrestler in college who now wrestles with some of the toughest issues right here on the House floor. Congressman
I thank the
Jim
gentleman,
Jordan, good to see you.
I thank the gentleman for yielding, and more importantly, thank him for his leadership on this most fundamental, most basic of issues. You know, you think about the folks who started this place, this experiment in freedom we call America. In Europe, they said you have to practice your faith a certain way, and they said, no, we don't. And we're willing to risk it all, get on a boat, risk everything, come to America where we can practice our faith the way we think the good Lord wants us to. And they did. They risked everything to come here for that fundamental principle. This experiment in freedom we call America, the greatest nation in history, was founded on that simple yet basic and profound principle. The document that started it all, and it's probably been talked about. I haven't been here for the whole hour. But the document that started it all, the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident. All are created equal, endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights. So the document that started this experiment in freedom started with this simple concept that there is a Creator, and that's where we derive our rights from. Not gifts from government, not grants from government, but gifts from the Creator, gifts from God. And here's why this is so important. Because this attack on this basic and most fundamental principle is not isolated. Think about what we are witnessing in this country today regarding so many of your liberties. Start with the one we're talking about tonight, the most basic, your First Amendment right to practice your faith the way you think the good Lord wants you to. There is an attack on your First Amendment religious liberties, your religious liberty right. But there's also a First Amendment attack on freedom of the press. We now know that what this Justice Department did relative to Mr. Rosen, First Amendment attack on freedom of the press. There's a violation and attack on your First Amendment rights to free speech, political speech, as evidenced by the IRS issue. There's attacks on your Second Amendment rights, and as we just learned this past week, potentially your Fourth Amendment rights to be free from unreasonable search and seizure. So this is critical because this is the issue that started it all, but it's also critical when viewed in context, when viewed in the overall attack on freedom, the overall attack on the Constitution, the overall attack on the Bill of Rights. And that's why I applaud the gentleman from Nebraska for his leadership, and as he well said, the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Lipinski, on the other side of the aisle, who understands these basic principles and basic freedoms and how central they are to the American experience and to what we call the United States of America. And with that, I would yield back to the gentleman.
Thank you so much, Congressman Jordan, for your thoughtful words, your powerful presentation. We're just so thankful for your tireless leadership on this and so many other issues. Thank you for coming tonight. I think it's most appropriate that my good friend, Congresswoman Diane Black from Tennessee, gets to close the hour. Diane Black is the primary author of the Health Care Conscience Rights Act, and we've been proud to stand in partnership with you as you've taken the lead on this term, this Congress. So I'll turn it over to you now.
I thank the gentleman from Nebraska for yielding, and I am getting a signal from the Mr. Speaker that I have 1 minute left, and so I am going to reserve what I have written up in so many words to just talk very briefly about what my colleagues have already addressed up to this point in time. The bill that we are talking about, Health Care Conscience Right Bill, would simply take us back to where we were before a decision was made by Ms. Sebelius to change the way in which we have operated in this country now for over 235 years. All we're asking is to take us back to where our founding fathers had us from the beginning, as has just been talked about with Mr. Jordan, about the founding principles of this country, where people came here to be able to practice their deeply held beliefs without having government intrusion. This is so important for the American people to understand that this is not about the issues that sometimes are talked about from the other side about birth control. This is about religious freedom. And I thank the gentleman for leading this evening. We'll have much more conversation. And once again, thank you for being a leader in this arena.
Thank you, Congresswoman Black. We're so grateful for your leadership. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Thank you.
Go ahead. We'll do pursuant to Clause 12A.
Okay. Nothing else? Okay. Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the Chair declares the House in recess, subject to the call of the Chair.
Earlier today, the House passed a bill that would require the Securities and Exchange Commission to issue rules governing swaps made between the U.S. and foreign entities. Members also began debate on the 2014 Defense Authorization Bill, which provides $638 billion for Pentagon programs and $85 billion for the Afghanistan war and other overseas operations. It would also authorize funding for new construction at the Guantanamo Bay Detention Center, which President Obama wants to close. The House begins amendment debate tomorrow. Follow the House live here on C-SPAN when members return Thursday.
The C-SPAN video library has reached a milestone. Since its online launch in 2007, there are now more than 200,000 hours of original C-SPAN programming, public affairs, politics, history, and nonfiction books, all totally searchable and free. A public service created by private industry. America's cable companies.
National Security Agency Director Keith